Hello! Our story begins inside the executive building, with 4 Jedi Masters walking in to confront the evil Sith Lord. They were unsure of the reality of the situation. They had faith that Anakin had told them the truth, but there was no absolute confirmation of this. The LAAT they arrived on lifted off and departed for the Republic military base. They turned back and Mace stopped. He saw someone coming towards them. Kit turned back around and saw the individual, and he tried to run cover for the Jedi Master, but it was too late. The man was a Twi'lek representative from Ryloth, one that frequently worked with Free Tom. He pulled out his hologram and grabbed Mace by the shoulder, and turned it on. Mace tried to pull away as he and the other 4 Jedi looked down at the hologram. In the man's hands, a blue flash illuminated, and the Jedi were drawn in. It was a virtual realm, one with gods and warriors, a place where myth meets might, and battlefields are filled with legendary champions like Anakin himself. Skywalker's train of thought was completely derailed as he was entranced by the amazing PvE and PvP battles of this legendary realm. Because as the man told Anakin, this wasn't just any event, it was the biggest event to date, the Asgard Divide. Call upon mythological characters of Loki, Thor, Freya, and Odin. To get a hold of the legendary champion of the Asgard Divide, log into Raid for 7 days between now and October 23rd. Not to mention, if you don't try and stop the Jedi from killing the Chancellor, you can get extra rewards for logging in for 7 more additional days. Aside from getting one of the champions through your 7-day login streak, you can get your hands on the other 3 champions through in-game activities. Each of these champions have their own benefits, such as Odin's Berserk debuff, and his ability to steal enemies' buffs, or Loki's ability to evade enemies and cloak himself. So for new players, download Raid Shadow Legends using my link to get your hands on $60 worth of benefits, such as Tagoar, considered to be a top 3 epic in the game, 300,000 silver, energy refill, 1-day XP booster, and 10 XP brew magic, not to mention extra incentives for you once you reach level 25. So just hit my link, and once you're in crushing your enemies, come find me under the name Penty Patrol and join my clan, Penty Patrol, and we'll be legends together. Thank you to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Inside the council chambers, Anakin stood facing the window, looking over the city. He could see all the way from here to Padme's residence. He could sense her through the Force, and it was almost like she could sense him. Their bond had expanded in a way he would have never foreseen. They were closer than ever now, and to mirror it, so was the war being over. Everything mattered, every small step, and now that he knew what Palpatine was, he realized how each moment leading to now was set up to pull him to the dark side. It almost worked, and even in Anakin's own mind, it felt like it still could work. He was uncertain. His heart was pulling him across the city to Padme's residence. His gut was planting him inside the council chambers, and his mind was tugging him towards Palpatine's office. Skywalker could hear words he had never heard spoken to him before, as they stretched out through his mind. Palpatine's voice was audible. He was trying to pull Anakin from his position, trying to get him to make one choice, one that could entirely and fundamentally change the status quo of the galaxy. The balance of the Jedi Order and the Force rode on his shoulders, and for the first time since returning to Coruscant, Anakin could feel himself consciously recognize it. Palpatine was luring him. Instead of caving, he closed his eyes and felt outwards, trusting what Yoda had said. The advice was to let go. Anakin needed to let go, not of Padme, not of the Jedi, nor Obi-Wan, nor Ahsoka. He needed to release his fear. If every crucial step since his return to Coruscant was to turn him, then everything was planned. If Dooku was Palpatine or Sidious' apprentice, then his death was premeditated. Anakin was meant to win that duel, so did he really win? If Palpatine was a Sith, which he knew him to be, he drove a wedge between Anakin and the Council, one that Palpatine knew to prey on due to Anakin's own insecurities and issues with the Council. He knew that they weren't Anakin's favorite people in the galaxy, and he tried to create such a divide that it couldn't be rectified. Anakin's mind went further and further. The only thing he could really not come to a conclusion on was his nightmares, but even Palpatine knew about the dreams he had before his mother died, so maybe it wasn't the Force giving him visions of the future, maybe it was something created through some dark ritual. All of this fuzz started to spin Anakin's mind in circles. He was getting dizzy. He was realizing what had been done to him. Everything in his life was a lie, and he couldn't react on it. The only place he should be is with Padme. But in case the nightmares he had were true, then he would wait here. He would wait until Mace Windu and the other 3 Jedi returned from the executive building, and when they did return, he might make the rank of Master. That was his only hope in the galaxy, and he had to trust it. Because the more Anakin thought about things, the more he considered what Palpatine really was, and the more dire the reality became. Palpatine never had Anakin's best interests at heart. His only motivation was creating a monster, one powerful enough to fight Jedi, to kill Jedi, and to help him create an evil regime. Anakin was sick to his stomach. This was all wrong. The Jedi may have not been perfect, but how could they be? Anakin was telling their ancient rival in the Force everything they did wrong, and what else were they supposed to do? They couldn't sense Palpatine. The dark side clouded everything for the Order. Palpatine might kill them. Anakin's mind then derailed. That thought plagued him more. Palpatine might kill Mace, Saesee, Hagen, and Kit. Could he allow that to happen? If Anakin went, he could be tricked into falling for another trap. He couldn't do that. He couldn't go. He got frustrated. He wanted to do something, but doing anything felt wrong. Breathing felt difficult. He could feel his lungs begin to tighten and his neck started to grip itself. This was so wrong. Anakin's eyes scanned the entire gorgeous city of Coruscant, and he returned to where Padme's residence was. There she was. He could still feel her. She was so close. She wouldn't want him to act on something he believed was false, and so he wouldn't. Going to the executive building would only make things worse. Anakin found his chair, and he felt it with his bare hand. It was so nice. The material that made the chairs in the High Council chambers were remarkable. He slipped down into the chair, and slid his back till it was in an unnatural arc, but one that felt comfortable in the moment. Here, he would stay. The Jedi would be alright, and they would come back. Everything would play out the way it needed to. Tough love, that's all it was, just tough love. Mace didn't hate him. He wasn't jealous. He was giving him tough love. Anakin had just given Mace a reason to trust him. That was all that mattered at the end of the day. Inside the executive office, Palpatine's lightsaber sped between duelists. On the ground, not far from his boots, were the dead bodies of Agen, Kolar, and Cece Tin. Kit Fisto was thrown into the wall and ducked, before the wall held a distasteful slash in it. Sidious leapt forward and could sense that Anakin was not coming. This was do or die, but something had become more apparent to the Sith Lord. He would not beat Mace Windu in a fair duel. Sidious couldn't even believe it himself. Mace was doing everything within his power to win this duel, and Fisto was just keeping pace. The Dark Lord spun away from the two Jedi and shot a burst of electricity at the wall, sending out an explosion, ripping through the electrical circuitry and sending a firestorm into the main corridor of the executive building. Surely clones or the Senate Guard would come to help. Mace looked to Fisto, who nodded and quickly moved to make sure no one came to Palpatine's aid. Sidious slipped another strike. He could feel this fight withering. Why was he struggling? Palpatine had never experienced such a sensation. He hadn't held true fear since his last spar with his former master. Darth Plagueis the Wise was a monstrous duelist, but Mace, he was different. Like an untamed Rathtar, he struck without hesitation, but he had the patience of a true Master Jedi. All of these years, they sat across from each other, sitting in meetings while Palpatine planned for the collapse of the Jedi Order, and now, in his chance to get what was rightfully his, he was choking. How could this be? Mace drove his Jedi weapon forward, and it clipped Sidious's blade, tossing it from his hands as the window next to them was shattered open. Mace drove his weapon, going for the kill, as Sidious ducked under it, slipping to his desk as blaster fire erupted in the background. Kit Fisto was engaging with the clones who had come into Palpatine's rescue. They had seen their Chancellor under attack, and they did not ask questions. The Coruscant Guard was programmed differently, and this was proof of their vastly different conditioning. Windu didn't move his attention away from the kill in front of him. Palpatine pulled his spare lightsaber out of the desk and drove it at Mace, who narrowly avoided the strike. Sidious got to his feet and ignited the other blade and swung forward, with two at the same time. The previous blade was not damaged, just cut open a little bit. Mace defended adequately. The same Mace Windu who had killed an equal to Palpatine in the Force months prior. Windu was gathering opponents like Infinity Stones. First, Mother Talzin, now Darth Sidious. Their duel continued to escalate as Kit Fisto could be heard in the background struggling. Commander Fox had called for reinforcements and the Jedi Master slipped. He was shot in the chest as he spun around, telling Mace to run. Kit turned back, throwing his hands forward and blasting a wave of clones with the Force. Sidious smiled at Mace, whose eyes drifted back to his opponent. Kit's screams could be heard in the background as he was killed by the Sith clone warriors. Sidious drove his weapon at Mace, and their blades lit the chambers, before the clones started to fire at Windu. They had their sights on him. Mace stepped away from the fight, blocking what he could before electricity was shot at him from Palpatine's hands. Mace defended it, barely, sending it back at the clones, killing a number of them in the process. He turned to face Sidious and shifted away from the strike before losing his balance, and electricity covered his body before he was flung from the Chancellor's office. Mace was growing tired, especially after handling Sidious's 2 lightsabers, and the clones were what Sidious needed to make the win. Within moments of Mace leaving the window, Order 66 was executed. Inside the council chambers, Anakin felt his chest. Something terrible had happened. What it was, he didn't know, but he was worried. Firstly, he contacted Padme, telling her to take her vessel and leave Coruscant immediately. She asked why, and he told her that something bad was coming. He wanted her to send the coordinates to R2, and he would meet her there when everything was resolved. She suggested Naboo, but he didn't think that was safe. Somewhere else would be safer. Tython, Christosis, Tibrin, or Rhodia would be safe places. She just needed to go. That's all that mattered. He would be there when everything was alright. She just wanted to know what was happening, and he didn't know, but he knew it was. Their call ended as he entered the elevator from the chambers into the main body of the temple. As he exited, he ran, looking for Master Sindralik. When he found him, the Jedi Master was walking with his 2 students. Anakin excused himself and turned Sindralik around, facing him away from the Padawans. He said that something terrible had happened. Master Drak listened as Anakin rambled through everything leading up to the Jedi departure from the temple and their engagement with Palpatine. With little time to spare, Sindralik needed to act. He knew they needed to get the young away from the temple, and the archives needed to be emptied just in case. He told Anakin to go to the archives, round up Jocasta and the archivists, and a dozen or 2 temple guards. Ferry everyone out to the underbelly hangar bays. They would use them to escape. He gave Anakin the directive: send the Jedi to these locations: Or Janak, Sanctuary Mount on Quen, Tharbin, Mon Calamari, Alfronia, and Dara. Some of those outposts were still in operation, others were not. The main point being, they'd be safe from whatever was coming. He did tell Anakin to make sure everyone saw this as a drill. The temple hadn't run one of these in over a century. It was important to keep the intensity of this at a quiet hum. No need for panic to ensue. Once everyone was ferried out, Sin gave Anakin his key, telling him to go to the archives, use it to send a message out to the wider Jedi Order. If the 4 counselors were truly dead and Palpatine was the Sith, then their worst fears had been realized. Skywalker nodded and ran. Master Jarlath told his 2 students to follow Master Skywalker, as he went to prep the temple defenses. As Sindralik went to the front of the temple, he could see it. Members of the 501st and Coruscant Guard were amassing at the steps of the temple. It was now or never. The doors were barricaded and the rest of the Temple Guard unit surrounded Sin. In the archives, Jedi were working quickly, as it became abundantly clear to each of them that the Force was disrupted. Something terrible was happening, and they didn't know what it was. Many of the younglings and Padawans inside the temple didn't know either, but they could feel it. Their senses weren't as attuned to the adults running around the temple in a quiet panic, but they knew something was wrong. The archives were emptied quickly, as transports of Jedi started to abandon the temple. Once upon a time ago, the Jedi Temple sat above the city skyline, and because it did, there were lower hangar bays. All of these had been since covered up before Palpatine's birth, but there were tunnels created by the Jedi so they could escape if anything wrong happened. These transports were then loaded. A couple hundred Jedi were going to each of the previously mentioned locations. As they prepared to leave, the first transport was blown out of the sky. Venators had lowered themselves into the city skyline, and they were blockading everything. Everyone in the temple heard it when the first Jedi transport was rocked and obliterated. The Venators weren't firing on the temple though. Perhaps Sidious wanted his formerly future pupil to live. Despite this, the archives were still moving information out of them into disks and holocrons so they could be transported easier. With the temple completely blockaded, the Jedi had no choice but to move into the lower city itself. Sindralik informed everyone that the temple was under attack, and it was time to move into the underbelly of it. He divided the Jedi up into groups, corresponding with Jedi Masters that would guide their students in the safe locations. As far as they knew, nowhere was safe, except with each other. As he was relaying these orders, the doors were bursted down, and a traitor rose from the shadows of the Temple Guard unit. Skywalker finished sending his message, and when he turned around, Shakti was facing him. Having been given the adequate time to finish her vision, she foresaw Anakin's betrayal, and what he would become. But he hadn't betrayed the Order or the Jedi. She came here to stop him, and yet he was working with them. As Yoda said, the future is always in motion. So, Shakti very quickly helped him with what he was doing before rushing back to the archives to ferry the last group of Jedi younglings out of the temple. Anakin could see the Temple Guard unit start to break, and as they did, he saw Sindralik engage with the Temple Guard. Their lightsabers were slamming together, and Anakin ran towards them. His own blade ignited as he leapt into the air, Grand Inquisitor, the future Sith loyalist, slipped away from the strike as he parried Sinjalik and swung for Anakin's back. He blocked with his lightsaber in a reverse grip before spinning himself around aggressively and shoving his weapon forward. Anakin told Sin that he would handle this. The barriers were breaking. Master Jalak wasn't one for taking orders, but Anakin was buying him time to regather his forces. Sin ran back to the front lines and continued fending off the approaching clones. Anakin and Grand Inquisitor locked their blades together, and he blasted the Jedi Guard off his footing. Similar to his fight with Dooku, Anakin stormed forward and thrusted his lightsaber at Grand Inquisitor. He defended himself until being thrown into a wall. Feeling the rising darkness, Anakin didn't cave. But to protect his brothers and sisters, he would let gravity decide Grand Inquisitor's fate, cutting a pillar over and watching it crash on top of the Temple Guard. Anakin ran to help before an explosion rocked the front gates, sending Anakin, Sin, and the other Temple Guards in the various directions, and with that explosion, everything went dark. The clones stormed through the temple gates. LAATs were ferried into the hangar bays at the bottom of the temple, as well as the top, and the clones encircled everything. While the guard unit bought time for the others to escape, those caught alive would be executed. The temple guards not knocked unconscious by the blast fought until the bitter end, and it was bitter. They were each killed one by one. Outside the temple, the clones turned on their Jedi generals, killing them in action, leaving the few surviving Padawans without their teachers. Padme from hyperspace watched the news unfold, watching the flames emanate from the Jedi Temple, seeing the Venator fleet overshadowing the once prideful Tower of Hope in the galaxy. The Jedi were the victims of a plot, and now they paid the price for it. Sidious's empire would be formed in the following day. For now, it was time to find Skywalker. Palpatine entered the Jedi Temple once the battle was over, and he found a badly damaged Grand Inquisitor, one still loyal to his new Emperor. He survived Anakin. As it turns out, revenge does wonders for the will to live, don't you think? Grand Inquisitor was tasked with taking Commander Appo and a squad of the most elite members of the 501st to find the Jedi. In the meantime, Commander Fox would maintain control over the temple. The Wolf Pack would be brought back from Kidda Nemodia to assist in the hunt for the Jedi Order. In the meantime, members from the 7th Sky Corps would be sent to Mustafar to wipe out the Separatist leaders. Everything was going accordingly to Palpatine's plans, minus Anakin's presence, which at this point, did he really need him? The Jedi Order was in serious pain. For the survivors who were able to make it to any of the listed planets, or Janak, Sanctuary Mount on Quen, Tharbin, Mon Calamari, Alfronia, or Dara, they were left with disappointment. Instead of finding allies, they found scraps of abandoned order, one that at this current moment felt truly dead. Inside the Jedi Temple, Anakin was dragged out of the rubble by an individual. When Anakin's eyes opened, there was a light pouring through the gates. When he was last awake, there was no light, only darkness. The city lights illuminated in the distance, and now there was nothing but the pulsing aura that glimmered across his eyes. Anakin felt his body. It was both broken and bruised. He looked up, and the sun from outside the temple was blocked by the silhouette of a Jedi who had failed, one who was outnumbered and now wounded. Because he wasn't electrocuted as badly as he could have been, Mace Windu was able to regain his consciousness before colliding with the ground and dying on impact. His robes were burned and charred, but he helped Anakin off the ground. Skywalker held his hands on his knees and felt a creaking from his back. A surviving temple guard got under his shoulder and he winced in pain. Anakin's eyes scanned the ground around him. Coruscant guardsmen and 501st members were strewn about the temple, none of them killed by a lightsaber. A couple of them had blaster marks, presumably from being blocked back at them, or used as meat shields by Mace. A good number of them had broken armor. Similar to his battles throughout the war, Mace utilized the ability of Force Punch to incapacitate the clones. He was a Jedi who cared deeply about their individual lives, and he tried his best to spare them. Mace had already pulled out a number of dead temple guards, but there were a few who had survived, which was better than nothing. He told the survivors to get going. They were going to retrace the steps of their allies. Anakin asked for an update, and he wouldn't get one. That would come later. Mace didn't know when Sidious would return to the temple. Because of the messages sent out by Skywalker the night before, Master Kenobi ended up on Ord Janak with Caleb Dume, and Master Yoda found no survivors on the planet of Mon Calamari, which he kind of expected due to its odd positioning. Master Quinlan Voss was able to find Padawans Nari and Cal Kestis at his location. There were numerous other survivors that were able to get to these safe locations. Master Jedi like Yoda, Kenobi, and Voss were able to unite eventually because they left their codes at previous locations, codes that could only be identified by Jedi. This allowed them all to know that their Jedi Order had surviving members, and that their fight was not over. Padme, now a galaxy away, was trying to get into contact with Anakin. R2 had received her transmission, but Anakin was nowhere to be seen, and the astromech was desperately trying to find his friend. If he could find him, then they could get away from Coruscant and back to her. Padme in the meantime settled into Polis Massa, because without the knowledge of Anakin's survival, she was overstressing herself, and it resulted in her going into labor early. Back inside the Ecumenopolis of Coruscant, the survivors from the temple followed a trail of blaster marks, dead clones, and dead Jedi through the Undercity. For many younglings and Padawans, they were seeing what had happened to the underworld. They didn't know what it was like for people down here. And for many of the instructors, knights, and masters, they too didn't realize what they allowed right under their temple. The people of the underworld were not pleased to see the Jedi hanging around, looking for refuge. They had been neglected by the Jedi Order and the Republic for decades. Entire generations of people were put to disadvantage because the Senate did not care about their own planet. Coruscant representatives did not care, and while the Jedi did, they could not do everything for everyone, even though it seemed like the people with control over a magic power in the Force could do everything. The Jedi were not treated kindly. The police force was called on them by gun runners, smugglers, death stick dealers, crime bosses, mafia heads, and local drunks down on their luck. Everyone around the underworld made it as difficult as possible for the Jedi to get by. They didn't care if these were children and teachers. If they died, then it was another generation of pain stopped from transpiring. The underworld was kill or be killed, and the Jedi were trespassing on their territory. Plus, for some of these people, they planned on leveraging the police force into their pockets. If they could get good boy or good girl points with the local enforcement, then they could get a freebie for doing something they shouldn't be doing. This behavior forced the Jedi to continuously be put on the run. Whether they were being chased by clones or enforcement droids or locked in firefights, the Jedi did not catch a break. They were all alone, out against the entire planet. They didn't have anywhere to sleep, and the young were falling behind because their little bodies couldn't maintain both the constant movement and the lack of sleep. It was a hard evacuation. Temple guards sealed off areas of the city and defended the Jedi on the run, but not even that worked. The clones had many more forces to use, and in one occasion, the guards had bought the Jedi time to escape, and then they were seen by a mafia boss looking for extra credits. He called the enforcement on the Jedi, and they were blindsided by an attack, one that killed every single member of their group. When the temple guards caught up after their victory, they saw terror. This continued across the underworld because the Jedi were split up. This was meant to ensure that they didn't get captured and killed altogether, but thinning their numbers played right into Palpatine's hands. Grand Inquisitor was doing his master's bidding, and he had confirmed kills on numerous Jedi in the Undercity. He even killed a mob boss for gloating. Grand Inquisitor didn't really have a reason to kill the mob boss, just for the pure joy of it. Palpatine, on the other hand, sat topside of Coruscant, planning. He decided that with the Jedi gone from the temple, and Commander Fox knocked out by the apparently not dead Jedi Master, he decided to level the temple, which was done. After the temple was destroyed, the Venators were placed around the underworld portals around the planet. Each of the holes that went down thousands of levels into the city were blockaded. Supplies would be limited to the lower level populations until the Jedi were found and killed. This plan was meant to starve the people into turning on the Jedi, which didn't seem like a problem, as the Jedi were already being turned on by the people of the underworld. However, despite Palpatine winning the war and flipping the tide of the generational battle between Jedi and Sith, he was still paranoid. More Jedi than he wanted to survive were alive. They still had thousands of members, and that was a problem. Most of the counselors had died on the front lines, but Masters Yoda, Kenobi, Windu, Shak Ti, and Kaj had been unaccounted for, which posed a problem for him. As a result, he enacted his first wave of imperial authority on the galaxy. He used fear-mongering as a tactic. Due to the failure of the clones to properly trap the Jedi inside the temple, the Empire needed to move into the future, finding new soldiers, finding new military personnel, and moving on past the clones. His message regarding the clones was to go into the underworld, kill the Jedi, and then lay down their arms so they could be forgotten about. It wasn't the winning message, and even some people felt bad for the clones, but not enough to actually make a serious difference. Even with the chips fully activated, the clones felt a little betrayed, but not enough to change how focused they were on destroying the Jedi. They had a duty to fulfill. On the other hand, to ensure protection for himself, Palpatine was welcoming turned Jedi into his ranks. They were to join Grand Inquisitor and begin targeting their former brothers and sisters. He loved the idea of a Jedi Master having to kill a turned Jedi Padawan or Knight. On top of this, Palpatine wanted to ensure his control over Coruscant. With a few trillion residents, he would mirror his galactic influence on a planetary level. Palpatine planned on stripping rights from galactic citizens, and he would first experiment with the people of Coruscant. Down below, Anakin and the Jedi would reunite with each other. Being that they were getting picked off consistently by large groups of clones, they couldn't afford to be separated. Thanks to their time in the underworld, they were able to find an abandoned building, not filled with asbestos, and secure it. This gave them sanctuary for the time being. Yoda, Obi-Wan, Quinlan, and Oppo Rancisis were able to gather up outside of Coruscant and prepare for a counter. But there was worry and second thinking. Did they, as Jedi, go to Coruscant to kill Palpatine, or did they go to the underworld and find the rest of their order and survive? That question remained unanswered. Obi-Wan, while the other three Jedi Masters considered this, was able to get into contact with Padme by happenstance. She had called his frequency to ask if her friend was alright and see if he knew about Anakin. She had given birth, and R2 was able to inform her that Anakin was alive in the underworld, but where, that was undetermined. She wanted to go back to Coruscant, but if she went, the children wouldn't be safe. She wanted the children with someone she trusted, and Obi-Wan was that person. Padme asked that he explain the situation to the other masters, and if they agreed, then she would drop the twins off before going to Coruscant to rectify the situation in the Senate. Obi-Wan was worried about her safety, but she was right. Palpatine couldn't afford to lose the Senate yet. He couldn't openly kill her, so they would play things the same way they did during the Clone War. Plus, she was the key to getting Anakin. Whether it be alive or not, she was that key. The three other masters decided that Obi-Wan, the twins, and the displaced younglings and Padawans would go to Sanctuary Mount on Quen. Despite it being Republic territory, it was close enough to Hutt space that Palpatine wouldn't touch it. The political move for Palpatine would be securing Separatist territory won after the war, not securing territory that belonged to the Republic, but had no clone presence and could be overrun by pirates in a matter of hours. With Padme, Oppo, Yoda, and Quinlan returning to Coruscant, the stage was set for the Jedi to win this war with Palpatine. But instead of faring down to the lower levels to play this safe, the Jedi went to the executive building. When they arrived, they were ambushed by clones. The three Jedi Masters defended themselves adequately, as Master Rancisis told them to go and kill Sidious. He would hold off the troopers, which is exactly what he did. In a way mirroring Fisto's death, Oppo would die defending his brothers from the clone traitors. Quinlan and Yoda would duel Sidious, who was thriving off the dark side of the galaxy. Their duel dragged on throughout the Chancellor's office, and to Quinlan, two fell. And as Yoda was attempting to kill the tyrant himself, he was clipped in the shoulder by clones who were faring into the room by the dozens. Yoda, in a true moment of solidarity with the Force, threw his hands outwards, lifting every single being in the room with the Force and launching them across it. The clones were all knocked out, and Palpatine was left with a perfect kill shot, one that Yoda missed, only by a few inches. Yoda swung at Palpatine, who had moved out of the way just in time. He lost his entire arm in the process, and as a result of Yoda's miss, he electrocuted the Jedi Master until he knocked him out. Sidious would capture the Grand Master and torture him. In the 3 years following Yoda's defeat, much would change. Sidious's empire would grow. He would challenge the Jedi to come out and save their Grand Master, but Yoda, similarly to Eth Koth during the Clone Wars, used Jedi sign language to tell the Jedi to not come for him. It was a trap, and it would not be worth the risk. It was all Yoda could sneak into the message Palpatine sent, but it was enough to cement Yoda's death as a coming event. Aside from that, the underworld had been completely cut off from the upper world, and while many were upset with the Jedi, they were mending wounds left open by the lack of Jedi help in the years leading up to Order 66. Anakin was able to see his children and his wife on hologram, and it was widely known amongst Jedi Masters that Master Skywalker, as Sindralik called him on his death day, was in a relationship and had children. The Jedi had moved locations at least a dozen times, but every time they settled in a new place, they helped the people in the area. The biggest issue was food shortages, so the Jedi used what little supplies they could and helped people build farms so that they could grow without proper sunlight. It was very challenging and it failed a lot, but when it worked, the people they served were grateful. So much of the position on the Jedi had been changed, because in the era of the Empire, people saw how cruel Palpatine really was. It wasn't the Jedi. As a shrinking order of 3,500, they weren't big enough to change the galaxy. Not even Coruscant. They couldn't do it with 10,000 members, not even if they had 100,000 members, not even if they had 1,000,000 members. The galaxy was just too big for the Jedi to fix. This all went back to the fact that the Jedi weren't the problem. The individual who turned on them and then punished the people to get them was the problem. The thing is, unlike the top side and the reception of Order 66, the people below were actually seeing it. For the first several months, no one supported the Jedi. They were hunted non-stop, which is why they had moved so much. But the punishment for the people didn't stop. It wasn't like the people were actively protecting the Jedi either. Palpatine's restrictions on the underworld weren't for just a single level or district, it was the entire underworld, and the people started to wake up. This wouldn't end once the Jedi were gone. The underworld's desperation for protection, for affection from the top side, was to turn on the Jedi, but the common people, the ones that weren't mob bosses and lived off of their own means to get by, saw the Jedi for who they were, an order of monks who were displaced by a political rival, one who had lost their home, their children, their masters, and were betrayed by every pocket of the underworld. But it was an order that, despite those terrible actions and terrible events, never turned their backs on the people. They didn't put them down, they didn't act like they didn't exist. No, the Jedi, the survivors of a once huge order, took care of the people they came across. They gave them love and attention. They made sure they had food and their supplies, and even after the Empire cut them off from it, they kept helping. The Jedi rounded people up and put an end to the subjugation enforced on them by local mob bosses and pirates. They were a small order, but they were turning things around one day at a time, just like they had been for centuries. Aside from what the Jedi were doing, the clones were being replaced galaxy-wide, and on Coruscant were the last of their army. The TK troopers of the Empire weren't involved here. It was 4 legions of clones constantly facing down the harshest environment in the galaxy. Because, once supplies were cut off by the Empire and people started to run short on their personal stashes, they became violent. The quest to survive overruled their ability to allow Imperial occupation. Clones were miserable, and when they ran into the demons called Jedi, they ran. Mace had taught the legendary Force Punch abilities to the Jedi around him, and they were utilizing it. Mace, as the acting Grand Master, had ordered Jedi to not kill the clones unless they were left no choice. This was something that actually worked really well for the Jedi. Anakin was learning a lot from Windu, and because their trust was established by Anakin's decision to wait in the council chambers, they were as tight as any duo could be. Out on Quen, Obi-Wan was still taking care of Luke and Leia. The children were named by a hologram version of Anakin and a present Padme. Obi-Wan was the head of a small sect. He was working primarily with younglings and Padawans. The eldest member was a young man named Baylan Skoll, who was a Jedi Knight when Order 66 started. Obi-Wan was raising these young Jedi on his own, not to mention taking care of 2 children when Padme was off on Coruscant. Kenobi, while on Quen, had a small altercation. Ahsoka had found him and she stayed with him, and while she was there, Maul had found them. Quen was right outside of Hutt territory, and Crimson Dawn was searching for expansion, and so that's what they did. They climbed into unprotected Imperial territory, and instead of winning a single fight, Maul was brought in to kill the Jedi. Ahsoka, Baylan, and a couple of the other older kids were positioned to protect the children, but Obi-Wan was the sole fighter. Everyone else retreated into the Forest on a separate island from the Sanctuary Mount. Obi-Wan and Maul's legendary rivalry came to an end here on Quen. Kenobi defended himself from Maul and fought backwards across the Mount. As the 2 duelists fought, the Sanctuary Mount lit his beacon to signal to the pirates that they would never have Quen. When the fight got to its highest intensity, Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, instead of trying to meet his angered opponent halfway, decided to give him the fight. Obi-Wan had learned a lot about himself in the 3 years as a mentor of the young Jedi out here on Quen, so he went back to where it all started, with Qui-Gon. Obi-Wan shoved Maul back and stepped away. He could have killed him, but he didn't. Maul saw Obi-Wan switch into Form 4, which he hadn't used since their first duel in Naboo. Maul's eyes grew in anticipation as he readied himself, launching at Obi-Wan, and in 3 strikes, an opponent fell to the ground lifelessly. The ramifications for Crimson Dawn couldn't be overstated, but that was Crimson Dawn's problem now. Maul was gone, and that left one true Sith in the galaxy. Thanks to everything the Jedi had done in the 3 years since the fall of the Order, they were able to rally together a movement. What was becoming apparent is the clones were sick of this. Their inhibitor chips hadn't fully worn off, but they were tired of being mistreated. The Empire didn't care about them, even though it wasn't directly stated by Palpatine. The people didn't care about them because they didn't care, and their brothers were constantly being terrorized by wild packs of Jedi. What made matters worse is clones were running around with broken armor. Because the Empire no longer produced clone trooper armor, they didn't get replacement materials. They had some reserves for the first couple of months, but after that, it dried up. They didn't have anything more. Now, especially after being punched and beaten up by Jedi, they weren't really wearing armor, which theoretically shouldn't be a problem, but people in the lower levels were hunting clones too. There was a trophy system for mob bosses, and collecting clone munitions and whatnot. Because of how messed up the underworld was, this was their lives. TK troopers had multiple bases around the underworld portals, aside from of course the Venators that were still holding blockading positions over them as well. With clones like Rex, Wolf, Cody, and Gregor on and around Coruscant, they were able to help coax their brothers out of serving the Empire. It was a very hard change for many of them, especially because if they changed sides, they'd still be hunted by mob bosses. But the Jedi wouldn't be attacking them, so that was a benefit. Plus, there was something else growing. Aside from most of the Jedi in the lower levels being younglings and Padawans, there were the Temple Guards and Knights who had survived. Anakin was mounting them up and using them to begin building a rebellion. People were angry, and the Jedi directed that anger into their real opponents, the Empire. Anakin and Mace were splitting these responsibilities. Anakin was working with Rex and the Rebel clones to bring their brothers over to the right team, and Mace was building a resistance. All of this came to a head at the 3-year mark of Empire Day. Jedi generals, clone rebels, civilian resistance members, and everyone fighting for freedom implemented their plan. With 2/3 of the clone military that was still around the Empire working for the Jedi resistance, they rose up as well. Across the planet, Venators that were guarding underworld portals were blown out of the sky and sent crashing down into Imperial TK trooper bases. The Undercity was filled to the brim with weapons, and the civilians rose up. Unlike the clones, who would have been able to put down this insurrection, the TKs were immediately put on the back foot, and as a result, the Emperor was informed. Without the presence of Vader, the Inquisitors were sent to deal with the uprising. Thanks to the way things had played out, the Temple Guard unit was joined by civilians, while Anakin joined the rest of the Council, one he had consistently been a part of. Mace led Shaak Ti, Coleman Kaj, and Anakin to the executive building. Being that Mace had fought and technically beat Sidious before, he instructed everyone on how to combat him in one-on-one environments. It was especially hard for Coleman and nearly impossible to teach Shaak Ti, but each of them trusted their Grand Master and followed his instructions for Vapad. When they reached the executive building, Coruscant was locked down. Imperial destroyers were moved into the city and started to make their way to the portals to quell the insurrectionists. The rebels had a plan. They were going to pop the TK bases, and then they would take control over turbo lasers and smash the bottom of Imperial destroyers. It likely wouldn't do anything substantial, but at the very least it would distract the Empire while the rebels moved their forces back into the underground and targeted other prime targets. When the Inquisitors reached the front lines, the Temple Guard unit led the rebels into action. The clone rebels that had enacted Order 66 flipped the script and started attacking the Inquisitors, who threatened their position. Inside the executive building, Mace and the other Jedi confronted a group of TK troopers and defended themselves. As they started to slowly get encircled, the Emperor dropped down from the ceiling, something Grievous would have done during the Clone Wars. Sidious drove his weapon at the Jedi. Anakin swung at Palpatine and clipped his wrist, but extinguished his lightsaber. Sidious laughed, striking at Skywalker, before Mace defended him. Anakin ducked a shot and used the Force to launch a wave of TK troopers away from him. Sidious defended with 2 weapons, and the secret weapon that had just been exposed. Because he lost his entire arm to Yoda, he went to his old master's former hideout and used Cortosis alloy to coat the exterior of his metallic arm. Not only was the metallic arm physically dominant, but it would extinguish any lightsaber if it came in contact with a Cortosis. Mace handled the Sith Lord as the other 3 Jedi Masters threw the TK troopers out of the way, cutting through them or simply lugging them off the platform. Once Anakin's lightsaber ignited again, he charged in. He swung down at Palpatine, who stepped back and jabbed forward. Anakin avoided narrowly and pressed an aggressive assault. Due to his bond with Mace, he was able to expand his abilities in a more Jedi-like way that thrived in aggression. The Anakin that killed Dooku 3 years before was a completely different monster now. Palpatine ducked and defended, using his lightsabers, skills, and arm wherever he could. With the 4 council members closing in on him, he started to try and lead them into a chase, like he had with Quinlan and Yoda, but they didn't allow it. Whether it be getting in his way, or standing strong, or pushing him into a corner, they kept him engaged. His trap for the Jedi failed because the TKs were needed desperately on the front lines, and they were not clone troopers. Anakin swung into a lock with Palpatine, who kicked forward, shoving Coleman back, and then trying to kill Skywalker. As he did that, Mace caught Palpatine's arm in a lock, and used all of his strength to try and force it back, but it wasn't working. The metallic arm was locking, circuits tugging and pulling to resist Mace's physical assault. As Palpatine tried to stop Mace, he was able to kick off the ground and drive over the two opponents. When he landed, he avoided a strike from Shaak Ti, as Mace and Anakin got off the ground and realized what the other were doing, and they charged after the two duelists. Shaak Ti parried into an aggressive stance, before feeling her two allies run up behind her. She ducked, falling backwards, and driving her lightsaber in front of her chest to protect herself just in case. Anakin ran forward, swinging up. As Palpatine moved to block it, Anakin extinguished his lightsaber and tossed it to the side, using the Force to stop Palpatine's blade in a strike. Mace ignited a blue lightsaber and blocked Palpatine's own blade into his cortosis forearm, extinguishing the weapon as he dragged the other blade back, which Mace blocked with his amethyst weapon. He tossed Anakin back his lightsaber, and he drove forward, dragging the weapon out across Palpatine's body and cutting him in half with one firm strike. The Jedi had temporarily won. It was time to return to the front lines of combat. The Empire was weak without Palpatine, but nothing was weaker than the Empire and how it looked after the Battle of Coruscant. Despite the rebels winning big and early, they lost the full battle. They were forced back into the underworld once the Empire brought its Imperial Star Destroyers to the city skyline. But the casualties were far worse for the Empire. Aside from Palpatine, Clone War veteran officers were killed in the Venators destroyed, rising Imperial Stormtrooper officers and members, who were all elite, were killed in the battles. Not to mention, this loss was an overall terrible look for the Imperial war machine. They had all this power, all these military forces, and they were defeated by people who didn't even live where sunlight existed. They were defeated by a clone army that was considered obsolete. They were defeated by a Jedi Order that was seen as fragile after Order 66. This empire was weak. The tyranny established by Palpatine fractured their system, and they were going to pay the price as a galactic society because of it. The Jedi, rebels, and clones had done their job. Now it was time for senators like Padme, Bail, Mon, Rio, and a lot of them to strip power from Mas Amedda. What followed the rebellion of Coruscant were countless others around the galaxy. People had had enough, and this short stint as an empire would never work. Once people saw how fragile their bloated military was, they started to see a system that was built on sand, not on marble. It was weak, and especially without Palpatine, it would never last. This did not mean people were flocking to defend the Jedi. It meant that people realized their system was not in place for them. It was in place for an autocracy, one that benefited a single man, one that was now dead. The political reaction would take another several months to be put into effect. But while it was happening, rebels on Coruscant, as well as elsewhere in the galaxy, continued their uprisings. When the current power system was completely removed, the violence did end. The Jedi did not leave the lower levels of Coruscant. Without a temple on the top side, they started a new one. Both the Underworld Temple and the Sanctuary Mount on Quen were the two new locations of the Jedi Order, permanently. Out on Quen, a statue was built for the former Grand Master, and it became the training grounds for all younglings. Obi-Wan's own little academy would grow once the blockade around the portals were taken away. Anakin, after nearly 4 years, was able to reunite with Padme on Coruscant, before leaving with her to visit their children on Quen. Between the hugs he gave to Padme and the ones he gave to Obi-Wan and Ahsoka, he didn't know which one was biggest, but he was grateful to Obi-Wan for taking care of Luke and Leia for the entire duration of their absence. He would never be able to repay him. It was a bit hard for the twins to come around to Anakin. They had seen holograms of him speaking to them over the years, but seeing him in person was much different. Luke and Leia would leave Quen with their mother and father for the first time a couple weeks after Anakin's arrival. Padme had to leave and come back a few times in between because of the radical change inside the Imperial Senate. But when it was mostly finished, they all went out to Naboo, so the twins could see their family for the first time. Mace would inform Anakin that he was free to choose a path, whether it be Jedi or not. He was eternally grateful for his work in destroying the Sith, and in bringing balance to the Force. The Inquisitors were all but killed after the Battle of Coruscant, so there was really nothing else for the Jedi to fight aside from naturally occurring inequalities in the galaxy. Skywalker wouldn't abandon the Order, and so, with such a stance, Mace believed it was important for some restrictions of the Order to be removed. Age limits and M counts were among the first to go. If an individual could be part of the living force and harmonize and have a strong moral compass, then they were more than welcome within the Jedi Order. The Empire would remain the current order of the galaxy, but only technically in name. It was called the Democratic Galactic Empire, ironically, and it was one that had influence over everything. and with an imperial military built up by the beginning of the Tarkin Doctrine, the government would use the TKs for war on piracy and slavery, which wouldn't last much longer than 2 or 3 years. As for the clone survivors, they'd be given their freedom and taken care of, especially after all they did during the Clone War and on the Coruscant Rebellion. The galaxy would be forever changed by the Jedi again, and without their grit and their dedication to what was right, the galaxy wouldn't have ever found this new era of prosperity and unprecedented peace. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to all of our patrons: Benro Wells, Ozpin, Darth Vitiate, Seju Jagger, Groot36, Hunter Belden, Rosebird, Angel Dust, Alexander Reese, The Beginning and End, Jango Fett Clone, Nick5098, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tib, CC2024, Gallivan Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Great D Bane, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlinger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewa670, Anakin Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny DeGuin, Sense Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Callie, Youngling Slayer 66, Mammoth Studios, Anakin003, Lord Draken, 46 Star Wars, Erebus, Rex the Wolf, Man with 3 First Names, Darkseid46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. For supporting the channel, smash the like button. Let's talk about this story. So we've kind of done something similar to this before. The last time I did Anakin Never Turned, it was What If Padme Died. It was very oriented on his journey as a Jedi, and so with this one, I really wanted it to be like this rebellion on Coruscant. I like the idea of taking like the concept art for Duel of the Fates and using it here, where it's like this Coruscant uprising, but it doesn't come naturally. It's something that unfolds as the unnatural tyranny of the Empire kind of restricts the people of the underworld from being able to do anything, which is live. I think the Jedi would have a really bad rap once they first went down there, and then people would kind of realize like, oh, there's like not a lot of these guys. Like 10,000 people isn't a lot of people, especially in a galaxy full of quadrillions, especially on a planet full of trillions. Like 10,000 is not a lot of people. They can do only so much. And so I think that alone would be rationale enough for people to be like, okay, they've been hated, we hated them, but they're still helping us. They're not turning on us, they're not getting revenge. They're still helping us because we're struggling. Maybe they're not the enemy. So that was kind of the fun kind of arc for the Jedi in this story. Otherwise, though, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.